No filler, just pure thriller. Get your daily dose of intense, high-quality narratives and cinematic excellence that pushes the boundaries of digital media. We tell the stories that stick with you. Click subscribe now and join our growing community today. The toast glasses were still clinking when I walked through the door of the reception hall. I remember the exact sound, crystal on crystal. That clean, bright ring that meant celebration. I remember the way the room smelled like white roses and expensive champagne. I remember my husband's face when he saw me standing there in the entrance, the color draining out of it like water down a drain. I smiled at him. I was holding an envelope. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That moment didn't happen overnight. It was the result of 22 years of a life I had built with my own two hands. And one Tuesday morning in March, when everything I thought I knew turned out to be a story I had been telling myself. Let me go back to the beginning. My name is Claire. I'm 41 years old. For most of my adult life, I was a project manager at an architecture firm in Denver, Colorado. The same firm where I met my husband Daniel, when I was 19 and he was a junior architect with ambitious drawings and a laugh that filled every room he walked into. We got married young. Most people told us we were making a mistake. His mother, Patricia, was the only one who pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and said quietly, with both of my hands held in hers, "You are exactly what this family needs, Claire. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." I thought about that moment a lot later. I thought about it more than Daniel probably ever knew. We built a life in Denver that looked, from the outside, like everything a couple could want. A craftsman house in Washington Park with a front porch. We refinished ourselves one summer. 2 dogs, Biscuit and Walter, who slept at the foot of our bed. Friends who came over on Sundays for football and stayed until midnight. We didn't have children. It wasn't in the cards for us, medically, and we grieved that together and then we moved forward together, the way I believed married people were supposed to do. I say believed. Past tense. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was doing laundry on a Saturday afternoon. Daniel was at the office. He said he was at the office. And I was pulling his dress shirts from the hamper when I caught a smell that wasn't his. It wasn't perfume exactly, more like a specific combination of hand lotion and dry shampoo that I didn't recognize from anyone in my own life. I stood there for a moment with his shirt in my hands, and I told myself I was imagining things. That shirt could have picked up a scent from anywhere. A client meeting. A lunch. The elevator. I put the shirt in the wash and I didn't say anything. The second time I was reviewing our joint credit card statement online, something I did every month for budgeting, and I found a charge for a hotel in Boulder that I had no memory of. A Wednesday night, $182. I asked Daniel about it that evening over dinner, and he said it was a client meeting that ran late. Easier to stay the night than drive back in the snow. He said it so easily. He looked right at me when he said it. He passed me the bread. I nodded. I said that made sense. I believed him, or I chose to believe him, which is not quite the same thing but feels exactly the same in the moment. The third time there was no explaining it away. His phone lit up while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. It was sitting face up on the kitchen counter and I walked past it to get a glass of water and I saw the name. Not saved as a contact name. Saved as initials. 2 letters, a heart emoji. The preview of the message was 4 words before the screen went dark. Thinking about last night still. I put down my glass of water. I stood at the counter for a very long time. I could hear the shower running. I could hear Daniel singing something under his breath the way he always did. Some half-remembered song from the 90s that he only ever knew one verse of. The most ordinary sound in the world. 22 years of that sound. I didn't pick up the phone. I went into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and I made a decision. I was not going to react. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. What I found over the next 3 weeks, and I'm not proud of all the methods I used, but I am also not ashamed, was this: the initials belonged to a woman named Jade, 26 years old, a project coordinator at the firm who had been hired 8 months earlier. The hotel in Boulder was not the first. There had been a cabin rental in Estes Park, a weekend conference in Phoenix that Daniel attended alone. I found the receipts, forwarded to a personal email account he thought I didn't know the password to, because he had used the same password for everything since 2009 and some habits die hard. I did not confront him. I consulted a lawyer first. Then I came home and I made dinner and I sat across from Daniel at our kitchen table and I watched him tell me about his day. And I ate my food and I said the right things at the right times and inside I was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. The conversation happened on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after I found the phone. I laid out what I had found, calmly, item by item, the way I would present a project brief at work. The receipts, the emails, the timeline. Daniel sat very still the entire time I spoke. He didn't deny it. To his credit, he didn't insult me by denying it. What he said was, "I think we've grown apart, Claire. I think this has been over for a long time and neither of us wanted to admit it." I looked at him for a long moment. "Did I grow apart from you?" I said, "or did you just stop choosing me?" He didn't answer that. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. I signed my name 43 times across various documents, and each time the pen moved across the paper I felt something, not grief exactly, more like the sensation of a door closing in a very large house, the soft click of a latch in a room you won't be going back to. I kept the house. I kept the dogs. I kept the life we'd built in Washington Park, which I had helped pay for, which I had helped design, which bore as much of my fingerprints as it did his. Daniel moved into a loft downtown. He and Jade moved very quickly after that. The kind of speed that tells you the overlap was longer than 3 weeks of hotel receipts. I didn't follow their life online. I didn't need to. Denver is a specific size of city, the kind where you see people you know at the farmer's market, at the coffee shop on 6th, at the trailhead on a Sunday. Mutual friends who still loved us both were careful at first, and then eventually less careful, and through the ordinary seepage of social information, I began to understand that Daniel and Jade had become serious. That they had moved in together. That Jade wore a ring. I processed that information. I went for long runs along the creek trail. I repainted the front porch a color Daniel had always hated. A deep blue-green that I loved and had been outvoted on for years. I got a promotion. I threw a dinner party on my own for the first time in my adult life, invited 12 people, made my mother's roast chicken recipe, and sat at the head of my own table and felt, underneath the ache, something that I can only describe as the earliest possible version of okay. Then in October, 10 months after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang. It was Patricia, my former mother-in-law, Daniel's mother. I had kept in touch with her, not frequently, but the way you stay in contact with Hun. You someone who held your hands at a rehearsal dinner, and meant it. A text on her birthday, a call at Christmas. She had been kind to me through the divorce in the specific way of a woman who knows her son's failings and loves him anyway and does not make excuses for him. "Claire," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me." She told me that Daniel had called her the week before to let her know he and Jade were planning a wedding. A small ceremony at a resort in Lake Tahoe. "The same resort," Patricia said with a flatness in her voice I recognized as controlled, where Daniel and I had spent our honeymoon 22 years ago. I sat down on the porch step. Biscuit leaned against my leg. "He wants to use the same venue," I said. "He's already booked it," Patricia said. "I want you to know that I did not give him my blessing. I want you to know that I told him exactly what I thought." I thanked her. We stayed on the phone for a while longer. Before we hung up, she said, "There's something else. Something I've been thinking about for a while. I'd like you to come see me if you're willing." I drove to Colorado Springs the following Saturday. Patricia lived in the same house she'd raised Daniel in, a large Victorian on a quiet street with a garden she had tended for 30 years. She met me at the door with tea already made and the folder on the kitchen table that I assumed, initially, was some kind of legal matter related to the divorce. Some loose end I hadn't known about. It was not a loose end. Patricia sat across from me and she was quiet for a moment in the way of someone who has rehearsed what they are about to say and wants to make sure they get it right. Then she pushed the folder across the table. "I want you to read Section 4, she said. The document was her estate plan. I don't need to go into the full details of what it contained, that's between Patricia and her attorneys. But Section 4 was a clause, handwritten into the margins by Patricia herself years ago and then incorporated formally into the revised plan she had filed 18 months before Daniel and I separated. The clause was this: any heir who dissolved a marriage of 10 years or more without documented cause, meaning abandonment, abuse, or documented infidelity, would forfeit the relevant portion of the estate. The estate, which included the Victorian, a commercial property in Colorado Springs, and a portfolio of investments that Patricia had built quietly and carefully over decades was worth, in current market terms, approximately $2.4 million. Daniel had known about the general structure of the will. What he had not known, what Patricia had not told him, was that she had updated it 18 months ago after a conversation with me at Christmas where I'd mentioned, carefully and without self-pity, that things at home had been hard lately. Patricia had seen what was coming before I had. He filed, I said. He filed, she confirmed. And the hotel receipts your attorney documented are part of the public divorce record. I looked at her across the kitchen table with the folder open between us. Patricia, I said, why are you showing me this? She wrapped her hands around her tea mug. Because Section 7 names you as a beneficiary regardless of marital status, and I wanted you to know that before I die, while I can still look you in the eye and tell you myself. I'm not going to write here what I felt in that moment because I don't have the words for it exactly. It was not triumph. It was not the satisfaction of a plan coming together. It was something quieter and older. The feeling of being seen by someone who didn't have to see you, who chose to anyway. I drove home to Denver in the early dark, the mountains going purple behind me. The wedding was scheduled for the first Saturday of December. Patricia called me 2 weeks before it. She was not coming to the ceremony. Daniel had invited her, apparently believing that everything was fine between them, that mothers forgave everything. She had sent her regrets. What she asked me on that call, in a voice that was careful and deliberate, was whether I would be willing to be the one to deliver certain documents to Daniel at the reception. You don't have to, she said. I can have the attorney do it by courier. But I thought. She paused. I thought you might want to be there. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Here is what I kept coming back to. He chose that resort on purpose. He chose the place where we had started our life together, and he dressed it up in new flowers and a younger woman and called it a beginning. He stood at the edge of Lake Tahoe, and he did not feel the weight of what he was standing on. I wanted to be there. I called Patricia back the next morning and I said, yes, I want to be clear about something. I did not go to that wedding to cause a scene. I did not go with bitterness as my motive. I went because Patricia asked me to, because I was the logical person to deliver the documents, and because, if I am being completely honest, I wanted to feel something other than the hollow ache of being replaced at a place that still belonged to my memory. I also went because the top comment on every revenge story ever told is I would have waited until after they said I do, and I understood that impulse now, in a way I hadn't before. I waited. I did not enter the ceremony. I was not cruel or theatrical about it. I sat in my rental car in the resort parking lot, with Biscuit's travel blanket folded on the passenger seat, and I watched the sun move across the lake and I let them have their vows. I let them have the first dance. I let them have the cake cutting and the toasts and the first 40 minutes of the reception where everyone is still holding their glasses and feeling generous about the world. Then I got out of the car. The reception was in the main lodge, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the water. I walked in through the side entrance. I was wearing a charcoal gray dress, elegant, not celebratory. The visual equivalent of a period at the end of a sentence. I saw Daniel before he saw me. He was standing near the bar with 2 groomsmen, still holding a champagne flute, tie loosened, wearing the expression of a man who believes he has gotten away with something. Jade was 20 feet away at a table with her bridesmaids, laughing at something on someone's phone, her dress white and simple and her hair pinned up with small flowers. They looked happy. That is the honest thing to say. They looked like 2 people at the beginning of something. The beginning was about to get complicated. I crossed the room. Daniel saw me when I was 6 feet away and the champagne flute stopped halfway to his mouth. His face went through several expressions very quickly. Shock, then confusion, then a kind of cold alertness, like a man trying to calculate how much trouble he's in before he has all the information. Claire, he said. Congratulations, I said. I wanted to give you something. I held out the envelope. He didn't take it immediately. One of the groomsmen said quietly, Dan, who is? And Daniel put up one hand without looking at him. What is this? He said. It wasn't a question. It's from your mother. He took the envelope. I watched him open it. I watched him read the first page and then turn to the second and then stop. I watched the color change in his face the way I had watched it do once before, in a different way. At the beginning of all of this, behind him I became aware that the music had lowered. The room had a quality to it that rooms get when something is happening that most people don't understand yet, but everyone can feel. Jade appeared at Daniel's elbow. She looked at the papers in his hand. She looked at me. "Who are you?" she said. "I'm his ex-wife," I said. "And those are documents from his mother's estate attorney." She looked at Daniel. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer her. "Daniel," she said. "What does that mean?" The groomsman took a step back. Someone at a nearby table had stopped talking entirely. I'm not going to recount every word of what happened in the next 10 minutes, because some of it belongs to Daniel and Jade alone, and despite everything, I am not in the business of cataloging other people's pain for entertainment. What I will say is this: Jade, when she understood the full scope of what the documents contained, asked Daniel a series of very specific questions, and Daniel's answers to those questions were inadequate. Not because he's a dishonest person in that moment, he simply did not have good answers to give. What I will also say is that I did not stay. I had done what I came to do. The envelope had been delivered. The information was in the room, and the room would do with it what rooms do. I walked back through the side entrance into the cold December air. The lake was dark and still. My breath made small clouds in front of me. I stood there for a moment looking at the water, at the mountains at the far edge of it, at the way the lodge lights reflected on the surface in long broken lines. I thought about the night Daniel and I arrived here for our honeymoon, 22 years ago. The way he carried both bags because I had twisted my ankle on a trail the week before and was still limping. The way he pointed out the window at the water and said, "That's ours for a week, can you believe it?" Like it was a gift someone had given us. Like we were the luckiest people in the world. I thought about Patricia at her kitchen table, pushing a folder across the worn wood, saying, "I want you to read section 4. I thought about the blue-green porch back in Washington Park, Biscuit and Walter, the promotion, the dinner party, the earliest possible version of okay. I walked to my car and I drove back to my hotel room and I ordered room service and watched an old movie I'd seen a dozen times, and I slept better than I had in a year. 3 weeks later, Patricia called to tell me that Daniel had been to see her, that the conversation had been, in her words, long and necessary. That he was not contesting the estate clause, because there was nothing to contest. The documentation was sound, the clause was legal, and the infidelity was on record. That his attorney had advised him, in Patricia's dry recounting, to accept the terms as written. Patricia also told me that Jade had returned to Denver without him. I didn't celebrate that. Whatever was happening between the two of them was not my chapter of the story. I had not gone to Lake Tahoe hoping their marriage would fail. I had gone because a document needed to be delivered, and because, somewhere underneath the practical logistics of it, I needed to stand in that room and know that I was not a person things happened to anymore. I was a person who showed up. The inheritance was processed 8 months later, after Patricia underwent a routine procedure and decided the time had come to finalize certain arrangements while she had full clarity of mind. Her health, she told me firmly when I asked, was fine. She was simply a woman who planned ahead. The portion named to me was not the entirety of the estate. It wasn't dramatic or staggering in the way that stories sometimes make things sound. It was enough to pay off the remaining mortgage on the Washington Park house. The house that I had refinished the porch of. The house where Biscuit and Walter slept at the foot of my bed. The house that was, now, entirely mine. I called Patricia the day the deed updated, and I said, "I don't know how to thank you for this." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You spent 22 years taking care of my son, Claire. You were patient when you didn't have to be, and you were dignified when most people wouldn't have been. The thanks goes the other way." I sat on the blue-green porch after that call, in the late afternoon light, and I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not just the house, not just the money, but the whole strange arc of the thing. The laundry on a Saturday. The credit card statement. The name saved as 2 initials and the heart. The folder on the kitchen table. The envelope. The lake at night. The way things you think are ending turn out to be the beginning of something you couldn't have predicted. Biscuit climbed up next to me and put his head in my lap, and I scratched behind his ears and watched the street go golden in the last of the evening, and I thought, of all the thoughts I could have had, that's mine. All of it. Can you believe it? Like it was a gift someone had given me. Like I was, despite everything, exactly lucky enough.